Karen demolished my lakefront dock without warning, claiming HOA authority over my private property. The retired civil engineer in me smiled. 3 months later, I purchased the dam that creates their entire lake for $3.2 million. Now I'm lowering the water 12 feet for maintenance. Everyone's docks are becoming mudflats. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. My name is David Thompson and I'm a retired civil engineer who spent 35 years building dams, bridges and water management systems across the United States. After decades of working 12-hour days and traveling constantly for projects, I finally achieved my dream of early retirement at 58. With my substantial savings, pension and investment portfolio, I bought a beautiful lake cabin in Pine Valley, a small mountain community that seemed like the perfect peaceful retreat. The cabin was everything I had dreamed of during those long years of construction work. It sat on 3 acres of pristine lakefront property with towering pine trees, a sandy beach and a private dock that extended 40 feet into the crystal-clear water. The previous owner, an elderly gentleman named Frank Morrison, had built the dock himself in 1983 with proper county permits and professional inspections. When I purchased the property, all the paperwork was perfectly in order, and the dock was structurally sound. I had personally inspected every beam and joint with my engineering background. Pine Valley Lake was a man-made reservoir created in 1962 by a 60-foot concrete dam. The lake served the growing community for recreation, irrigation, and flood control. Most of the homes around the lake had been built in the 1970s and 1980s, long before any homeowners association existed. The original residents were a mix of retirees, working families, and weekend cabin owners who generally minded their own business and respected each other's property. That peaceful dynamic changed dramatically 5 years ago when wealthy newcomers started moving in from major cities, bringing with them rigid ideas about property values, community standards, and uniform aesthetics. They formed the Pine Valley Lake Homeowners Association despite the fact that many older residents, including myself, never agreed to join or be governed by their rules. The trouble started exactly 3 weeks and 2 days after I moved into my dream cabin. I was sitting on my dock at sunrise with my morning coffee, watching the mist rise from the still water while a family of ducks paddled peacefully near the shore. The tranquil scene was shattered by the sound of angry footsteps stomping down my wooden dock. "Excuse me. You absolutely cannot have this dock here," a sharp, demanding voice called out. I turned to see a woman in her early 50s marching toward me with the confident stride of someone accustomed to getting her way immediately. She was dressed in expensive designer workout clothes, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail, and her face wore an expression of righteous indignation that suggested she viewed herself as the neighborhood's moral authority. "I'm sorry, who are you exactly?" I asked politely, setting down my coffee cup and standing to face this unexpected visitor. "I'm Karen Whitfield, president and founding member of the Pine Valley Lake Homeowners Association. And this dock is in direct violation of our community standards and architectural guidelines." I looked around at my dock, which I had spent the last month carefully cleaning, sanding, and restoring with marine-grade stain. The wood gleamed in the morning sunlight, the railings were perfectly straight and solid, and it extended into the lake at exactly the same distance as most other docks around the water. "Ms. Whitfield, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not a member of your homeowners association. This dock has been here for over 40 years with all proper county permits and state approvals." Karen's eyes narrowed into an expression that would have been comical if it weren't so hostile. "That's completely irrelevant. The HOA has established jurisdiction over all lakefront properties regardless of when they were built or whether owners choose to participate in our organization." I'm afraid I have to disagree with that assessment. The dock is well maintained, structurally sound, and completely legal under all applicable regulations. I have all the documentation if you'd like to review it. "I don't care about your so-called documentation," Karen snapped, her voice rising to a level that sent the family of ducks scrambling away from shore. "The HOA board has voted unanimously, and all non-conforming structures must be removed within 30 days or face immediate enforcement action. Again, Ms. Whitfield, I'm not a member of your HOA and never agreed to be bound by your rules. You have absolutely no legal authority over my private property." Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red that clashed badly with her expensive outfit. "We'll see about that. I'm giving you official notice that this dock must be removed immediately, or we'll be forced to take decisive action to protect our community standards." She pulled out her smartphone and began taking photographs of my dock from multiple angles, muttering under her breath about property value destruction and selfish newcomers. Then she stomped back up the dock and across my lawn without another word, leaving me standing there wondering what I had gotten myself into. I thought that confrontation was the end of the matter. I was completely wrong. Over the next 3 weeks, Karen returned to my property 6 more times, each visit more aggressive and intrusive than the last. She brought different HOA board members to photograph and measure my dock. She arrived with a contractor who attempted to provide a demolition estimate without my permission. She even brought a woman she introduced as a property value specialist, who spent an hour walking around my lawn taking notes about aesthetic violations. During her 4th visit, Karen was accompanied by a man in an ill-fitting suit who introduced himself as the HOA's legal counsel. "Mr. Thompson," the lawyer said in a tone suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else, "my client has raised legitimate concerns about potentially unpermitted structures on lakefront property that could affect the entire community." "The dock is fully permitted," I replied calmly, handing him a thick folder containing all the original permits, professional inspections, county approvals, and state environmental clearances. "Everything has been properly documented and maintained for over 4 decades. The lawyer spent nearly 20 minutes reviewing the paperwork while Karen paced impatiently behind him, checking her phone and sighing loudly. "These permits appear to be completely valid and up to date," he finally admitted, looking somewhat relieved. "Of course they're valid," Karen interrupted before I could respond. "That's not the point at all. The point is that the HOA has established community standards that transcend individual property rights, and this dock simply doesn't meet our aesthetic and structural requirements." "Ms. Whitfield," I said as calmly as I could manage, "I've been extraordinarily patient with you and your organization, but I need to be absolutely clear about something. I am not now, nor will I ever be, a member of your homeowners association. I never signed any agreements with your organization, never agreed to abide by your rules, and you have absolutely no legal authority over my private property. If you continue to harass me and trespass on my land, I will be forced to contact law enforcement." Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a deep purple that made me wonder if she might need medical attention. "Fine. If you want to play hardball with the HOA, then we'll show you exactly what hardball looks like." They left in Karen's luxury SUV, and I genuinely hoped that would finally be the end of the harassment. Once again I was completely wrong. 4 days later, I returned from a supply run to the hardware store in town to find my beloved dock completely destroyed. Not simply removed or dismantled, but utterly demolished as if it had been hit by a natural disaster. The carefully maintained wooden planks were scattered across my lawn like driftwood after a storm. The support posts had been cut off at the waterline with what appeared to be a chainsaw. My beautiful 40-year-old dock looked like it had been the target of a precision bombing. I stood on my lawn staring at the destruction in complete shock. In 35 years of engineering work I had witnessed plenty of demolition, but this felt deeply personal. This was my sanctuary, my peaceful retreat from decades of stressful construction projects, and someone had deliberately destroyed it while I was away buying supplies to improve my property. I immediately called the county sheriff's office. Deputy Frank Martinez arrived within 45 minutes and spent over an hour photographing the destruction from every possible angle. "Do you have any suspicions about who might be responsible for this vandalism?" he asked while taking notes. "I have more than suspicions," I replied, and explained the entire 3-week saga of Karen's harassment campaign and her threats about decisive action. "We'll definitely investigate thoroughly, but without eyewitness testimony or video evidence, it's going to be extremely difficult to prove who ordered this destruction." The next morning, Karen appeared at my front door wearing the most satisfied smile I had ever seen on another human being. "Good morning, David," she said in a sickeningly sweet tone. "I noticed you've finally taken care of that dock problem that was bothering everyone in the community. You mean the dock that someone criminally destroyed on my private property? I wouldn't know anything specific about that situation. But I'm certainly glad to see you're finally coming into compliance with our community standards and showing some respect for your neighbor's property values. Karen, I know with absolute certainty that you're directly responsible for this destruction. I'm going to prove it, and when I do, you're going to face serious criminal charges for vandalism and trespassing." Her smile widened until it looked almost predatory. "Good luck with that investigation, David. Meanwhile, I hope you've learned an important lesson about respecting the HOA and working cooperatively with your community." Over the following 2 weeks, I conducted my own thorough investigation into the destruction of my dock. I interviewed neighbors, searched for security cameras that might have captured the incident, and even hired a private investigator with experience in property crimes. What I discovered made my blood pressure rise to dangerous levels. Karen had hired a demolition crew from a town 60 miles away, paying them in cash to remove the unauthorized structure from my property. She had provided them with official-looking paperwork claiming she was acting on behalf of the county government and had all necessary permits for the demolition. The crew, believing they were performing legitimate government work, had completely destroyed my dock while I was away buying hardware supplies. When I confronted the demolition company with evidence of Karen's deception, they were horrified to learn they had been tricked into destroying private property. The company owner immediately provided me with Karen's signed work order, a copy of the fake county authorization she had given them, and even security camera footage showing her directing the demolition process. I finally had all the evidence I needed to press serious criminal charges against Karen for fraud, vandalism, and conspiracy. But as I sat in my cabin that night, staring out at the empty space where my dock used to extend into the peaceful water, a completely different plan began forming in my engineer's mind. Instead of immediately calling the prosecutor, I decided to research the Pine Valley Lake area with the same methodical thoroughness I had applied to major construction projects throughout my career. What I discovered over the next several days was absolutely fascinating and gave me an idea for the most perfect revenge imaginable. Pine Valley Lake existed only because of a concrete dam built in 1962 by the Army Corps of Engineers. The dam was 60 feet high and 300 feet long, creating a reservoir that held approximately 2.8 billion gallons of water. The structure had been transferred to private ownership in 1987 and had been bought and sold several times since then. The current owner was a corporate entity called Mountain Water Holdings, based in Nevada, which had been trying unsuccessfully to sell the dam for over 4 years. The dam wasn't just a scenic feature. It was the only thing that created and maintained Pine Valley Lake. Without the dam's spillway system controlling water flow, the entire lake would drain down to its original creek bed within a matter of weeks, leaving all the expensive lakefront properties sitting beside a muddy stream instead of a pristine mountain lake. I spent the next month researching every aspect of the dam's ownership, the water rights associated with it, the legal requirements for operating it, and the environmental regulations governing its use. What I discovered was that Mountain Water Holdings was actually losing substantial money on the property due to maintenance costs, liability insurance, and regulatory compliance expenses. They were desperate to sell to anyone willing to take on the responsibility and legal liability. The asking price was $3.2 million, a substantial sum, but well within my retirement budget, especially considering what I planned to accomplish with the purchase. While I was researching the dam acquisition, Karen continued her campaign of harassment with renewed enthusiasm. She filed complaints with the county about my failure to maintain my property in accordance with community standards. She left threatening notes on my door warning about escalating enforcement measures. She even organized special HOA board meetings specifically dedicated to discussing the Thompson problem and how to bring him into compliance. I let her believe she was winning the war. The purchase process for the dam took 8 weeks of complex negotiations, legal reviews, and regulatory approvals. During that time, I had the entire structure thoroughly inspected by engineering colleagues who confirmed it was structurally sound but would require approximately $200,000 in maintenance work over the next 5 years. I also spent considerable time studying all the legal requirements for dam operation, water management, and environmental compliance. The day I officially became the owner of Pine Valley Dam was a beautiful Wednesday morning in early November. I drove out to inspect my new property, a massive concrete structure that controlled the destiny of every lakefront property owner in the valley. At the base of the dam was the spillway control system, a series of large gates that regulated how much water flowed downstream. For 60 years, these gates had been maintained in a position that kept Pine Valley Lake at its optimal level while allowing the natural creek flow to continue downstream to serve agricultural users in the lower valley. I spent that first day as dam owner carefully reviewing all the operational procedures, safety protocols, and legal requirements. Everything was properly documented and in perfect order. The dam was structurally sound, the spillway system was functioning correctly, and I had complete legal authority to operate it as I deemed appropriate within environmental regulations. That evening, I walked back to the ruins of my dock and called Karen's cell phone. "Hello, Karen. This is David Thompson." "What do you want?" she snapped immediately. "I wanted to inform you that I've decided not to press criminal charges against you for destroying my dock." There was a long pause. "That's a smart decision on your part. You would have lost in court anyway." "Perhaps you're right. But I did want to share some fascinating news with you about our beautiful community." "I'm not interested in anything you have to say, David." "Oh, I think you'll find this absolutely riveting. You see, I've been conducting some research into Pine Valley Lake, and I discovered something remarkable about how our little paradise actually exists. What are you talking about? Did you know that this gorgeous lake we all enjoy exists only because of a privately owned dam? And did you realize that whoever owns that dam has complete control over the water level of the entire lake? Another pause, much longer this time. So what's your point? Well, the truly fascinating part is that as of yesterday morning, I am now the sole owner and operator of the dam that creates Pine Valley Lake. The silence on the other end of the phone was so complete that I wondered if the call had been dropped. You're lying, Karen finally said, but her voice had lost every trace of its usual confidence. I'm afraid not, Karen. Would you like to see the deed of ownership? The operational permits that are now issued in my name? The liability insurance policies I had to purchase? That's impossible. The government would never allow a private citizen to. The dam has been privately owned for over 30 years, Karen. The government has nothing to do with its day-to-day operation. It's private property, just like my cabin was private property when you hired criminals to destroy my dock. I could hear her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. What exactly do you think you're going to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What am I going to do? Well, that's a very interesting question. You see, I've been studying dam operations extensively, and it turns out I have considerable discretion in how I manage the water levels for maintenance and safety purposes. You can't just drain the lake. There are environmental laws. You're absolutely correct about environmental regulations. I can't drain it completely without extensive permits and environmental impact studies. But I can lower the lake to what's called winter pool levels for routine maintenance and inspection purposes. That would involve lowering the current water level by approximately 12 feet. 12 feet might not sound dramatic to someone unfamiliar with Pine Valley Lake, but given the gradual slope of the shoreline, it would be absolutely catastrophic for the community. Every dock around the lake would be sitting on dry land. The boat ramps would be completely unusable. The swimming beaches would become expanses of muddy lake bottom. And all those expensive lakefront homes that Karen obsessed over would suddenly have a view of exposed tree stumps and debris instead of sparkling blue water. You wouldn't dare do something so destructive, Karen said, but her voice revealed she was beginning to understand exactly how vulnerable her precious community was. Oh, but I absolutely would dare, Karen. You see, you taught me something very valuable when you destroyed my dock. You taught me that sometimes people need to learn harsh lessons about respecting other people's property rights. This is completely insane. You can't punish the entire community because of one small disagreement. One small disagreement? Karen, let me remind you what actually happened. You harassed me repeatedly for weeks. You trespassed on my property multiple times. You filed false complaints with government agencies. You hired criminals to destroy my legally permitted dock using fraudulent paperwork. And then you bragged about it to my face. This isn't about one small disagreement. This is about you learning that actions have serious consequences. What do you want me to do? Tell me what you want. I want you to understand exactly what it feels like to have something you care about destroyed without warning or legal justification. I want you to experience the helplessness of watching someone else make arbitrary decisions that affect your property and your peace of mind. Please, David. Let's discuss this like reasonable adults. I tried repeatedly to discuss things reasonably with you, Karen. You weren't interested in adult conversation at that time. I ended the call and drove out to the dam. It was time to give Karen and the entire HOA a practical lesson in the consequences of their behavior. The spillway controls were located in a concrete building adjacent to the main dam structure. Using the keys provided by the previous owners, I entered the control room and reviewed the operational manual one final time to ensure I understood every procedure correctly. The current lake level was 2,847 feet above sea level, which was considered optimal for recreation and property values. Winter pool level was 2,835 feet above sea level, a difference of 12 feet that was well within my legal authority to implement for routine maintenance and safety inspection purposes. I placed my hand on the main spillway control wheel and began turning it counterclockwise. The massive gates slowly opened wider, allowing significantly more water to flow downstream. The change would take several days to become dramatically visible, but the process of lowering Pine Valley Lake had officially begun. I drove home and slept more peacefully than I had since the day Karen first trespassed on my property. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 5:30 a.m. David. Karen's voice was filled with panic. The lake level is dropping. You have to stop this immediately. Good morning, Karen. Yes, I've implemented winter pool protocols for comprehensive dam maintenance and safety inspection. It's completely legal and within my operational authority. This is absolute madness. People's docks are going to be destroyed. That's genuinely unfortunate. I have personal experience with having docks destroyed, so I understand exactly how distressing that can be. David, please listen to me. I'm sorry about your dock. I'll pay for it to be completely rebuilt. Just please stop lowering the lake. I'm not lowering it arbitrarily, Karen. I'm implementing standard winter pool protocols for essential maintenance work. The lake will stabilize at a perfectly safe level, just 12 feet lower than current. 12 feet will destroy everything. The marina, the boat ramps, the swimming areas, the waterfront restaurants. I'm confident the community will find ways to adapt. After all, you frequently told me that sometimes people need to make sacrifices for the greater good. By the second day, my phone was ringing almost constantly. Not just Karen, but other HOA board members, county officials, the mayor, local business owners, and even some of the longtime residents who had always been friendly neighbors. I answered every call with the same calm, professional explanation. I was conducting comprehensive routine maintenance on the dam infrastructure and had temporarily lowered the lake to winter pool level for safety and inspection purposes. Everything I was doing was completely legal and within my authority as the licensed dam operator. The panic throughout the community was evident and growing by the hour. Boat owners were frantically trying to move their vessels to the few remaining deep areas. Dock owners were watching helplessly as their expensive structures became stranded on increasingly exposed mudflats. The waterfront businesses were facing the immediate prospect of serving customers with a view of rotting fish and exposed debris instead of pristine mountain water. On the third day, an official delegation from the county government arrived at my door. County Commissioner Patricia Walsh, Sheriff Martinez, County Engineer Mark Stevens, and Environmental Officer Lisa Chong stood on my porch looking extremely serious and somewhat desperate. Mr. Thompson, Commissioner Walsh began formally, we urgently need to discuss this situation with the lake level. Of course, Commissioner. Please come inside. We gathered in my living room, and I served coffee while they carefully explained their concerns about the economic and environmental impact of the dramatically lowering water level. David, Sheriff Martinez said, I completely understand that you're upset about the destruction of your dock, but this is affecting hundreds of families and dozens of businesses throughout the entire valley. I absolutely appreciate the broader impact, Sheriff, but I want to assure you that I'm operating the dam strictly within all legal parameters. I have the proper permits, the technical authority, and the engineering expertise to manage these water levels safely and responsibly. County Engineer Stevens leaned forward intently. David, I've personally reviewed all your procedures and documentation. Everything you've done is technically and legally correct. But a 12-foot drop represents a severe impact on the entire community. What would it realistically take for you to restore normal pool levels? I looked at each of them carefully. These were reasonable, intelligent people trying to solve a legitimate community crisis. They weren't Karen, and they didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of this conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to be completely transparent about something important. This isn't fundamentally about the monetary cost of rebuilding my dock. This is about the principle that people must face meaningful consequences for their illegal actions. Karen Whitfield deliberately destroyed my property using fraud and deception, and then she publicly bragged about it. She needs to face appropriate consequences for those criminal actions. What kind of consequences would be sufficient? Commissioner Walsh asked directly. I want Karen to publicly apologize in writing for illegally destroying my dock. I want her to resign immediately from the HOA board. I want a legally binding written agreement that neither she nor the HOA will ever again harass property owners who choose not to join their organization. And I want Karen to personally supervise the complete rebuilding of my dock using her own money, not HOA funds. Sheriff Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Those demands seem reasonable given the circumstances. There's one final condition, I added. I want Karen to work personally with the same demolition crew that destroyed my dock, supervising every aspect of the reconstruction process. She needs to understand the effort and skill required to build something instead of just destroying it. County Engineer Stevens asked, David, if all these conditions are met to your satisfaction, will you immediately restore the lake to normal operational levels? Within 6 hours of Karen's compliance, I promised. The delegation left to present my terms to Karen and the emergency HOA board meeting that had been called to address the crisis. I didn't have to wait long for their response. Karen appeared at my door late that afternoon, looking like she had aged 15 years in the past 4 days. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her expensive makeup was completely gone, and her characteristic confidence had been replaced by obvious desperation. "David," she said quietly, "I accept all of your conditions." "Every single one of them?" "Yes." "I'll write and publish a public apology. I'll resign from the HOA board immediately. I'll pay for your dock reconstruction myself, and I'll make sure the HOA never bothers non-members again. And you'll personally supervise the construction work?" She closed her eyes and took a deep breath before nodding. "Yes. I'll work with the demolition crew to rebuild everything I destroyed." "Karen, I want you to understand something crucial. All of this could have been completely avoided if you had simply respected my property rights from the very beginning." "I know that now," she whispered. "I understand that completely." That evening, I drove out to the dam and began the process of closing the spillway gates back to their normal position. Within hours, Pine Valley Lake began rising again toward its optimal level. 4 days later, the lake had returned to its normal height, and the community crisis was officially over. But the lessons and changes that resulted would last much longer. Karen kept every single promise she had made. She published a detailed letter in the local newspaper accepting full responsibility for her actions and formally apologizing for the illegal destruction of my property. She announced her immediate resignation from the HOA board and recommended that the organization adopt new policies respecting non-members' rights. Most satisfying of all, she hired the same demolition crew that had destroyed my dock and worked alongside them for 10 days to rebuild it completely. Watching Karen spend 8 hours each day in work clothes, learning to use construction tools and contributing her own physical labor to repair the damage she had caused, was more educational than I had expected. The new dock was even better than the original. Karen insisted on using premium cedar lumber, stainless steel hardware, and professional-grade construction techniques that would last for decades. She worked diligently and without complaint, learning valuable lessons about the skill and effort required to create something beautiful instead of simply destroying it. When the reconstruction was finally completed, Karen approached me one last time. "David," she said, "I want you to know that I've learned something genuinely important from this entire experience." "What's that, Karen?" "I learned that having the power to do something doesn't automatically mean you should do it. And I learned that treating people with respect and kindness is always more important than enforcing arbitrary rules. Those are valuable lessons that will serve you well. I also learned that retired engineers can be remarkably creative when someone destroys their property." I couldn't help but smile at her unexpected sense of humor. That's definitely true. Karen moved away from Pine Valley 8 months later to be closer to her family. The new HOA board, elected after her resignation, adopted comprehensive policies governing only properties whose owners voluntarily chose to join the association. The harassment of non-members stopped completely, and the community became much more peaceful and cooperative. My beautiful new dock became a gathering place for longtime residents who remembered what the neighborhood was like before the HOA conflicts began. We often sit there in the evenings watching spectacular sunsets over the lake, and talk about the importance of being good neighbors who respect each other's rights and property. I still own and operate Pine Valley Dam. I maintain it in perfect working condition and keep the lake at optimal levels for everyone's enjoyment and recreation. But I also keep the operational manual easily accessible, just in case anyone else decides they want to teach me lessons about community standards or property rights. The interesting thing is that after everything that happened, I actually enjoy living in Pine Valley much more than I did before the conflict. The community learned to work together cooperatively instead of fighting over petty disputes. Property values increased because people wanted to live in a place where neighbors actually respected each other and resolved conflicts reasonably. And me? I learned that sometimes the most effective revenge isn't simply getting even with someone who wrongs you. Sometimes it's helping an entire community learn to treat each other better. Although I have to admit, owning the dam that controls everyone's lake doesn't hurt either.